And so the question for all of us is, there's a lot of tragedy. There's economic loss. Right now, people are unemployed. That's a significant stressor. Unemployment, we know it correlates with risk for substance abuse. Unemployment correlates with risk for suicidality. Unemployment correlates with risk for verbal, emotional, and physical abuse at home. And so we, as wellness practitioners, I think have a certain responsibility now, because from a prevention standpoint, if we're sending messages out now to people who are experiencing those triggers and are reactive, or might live in a dysfunctional family system, from a mental health perspective, it's so important now to give hope, to give optimism, and to come up with strategies. I uploaded in the chat a document from a webinar we did earlier today, where we had about 15 different resilience practitioners sharing their strategies. And if you can't access that, we'll make sure you can get a copy of that. So to begin this conversation, I think it's important for each of you to share your perceptions. And we created a brief poll for you. And I'm going to tell you what the poll is, and then I think Chuck will launch it. And it's an anonymous poll. You're not going to be giving your name, but the poll will allow us to get a sense of where we're at. And what it does is it asks you to reflect on what you're seeing amongst your family, your workers, in terms of how reactive people are. So on a 7-point scale, 1 would be you're seeing a lot of anxiety, you're seeing people reacting, and so forth, on a 1. On a midpoint, on the 4, it would be like people are getting by, they're coping. And at the 7 level, the highest level, people are finding strength, they're thriving. So Chuck, I think, is that okay if you can launch that poll?
Yeah, let me see what I'm going to warn everybody. This is my first time. Launch poll. Wow, that was easy.
So as you look around at the people you know and work with as a whole, to what degree are they reacting versus coping versus thriving on a 7-point scale? 1, they're reacting, and that's a whole. So you have to summarize all your perceptions right now. 1 would be reacting, anxious, fearful. 4, they're just coping, getting by. 7, they're thriving and showing strength. So go ahead and please make your rating. And Chuck will be able to tell the level of response.
Yep, we're getting close.
And then after this is done, we'll ask for comments about it. Like, why did you make the rating that you did? So if you care to do that now, you can say, I made a rating of 2, and here's why. I made a rating of 6, and here's why. Because we want to create a community. I'm hearing a little feedback, Chuck. So
okay.
we want to create a community here, a big part of that. And we think we can do it even with close to 150 people on the call. So Chuck, how are we doing?
We are, I'm going to end it right now, but everything's looking right now where 19% said 3, 19.
Well, you can show the screen. You can show the results of the poll.
There we go. Share results. Look at this. This is really cool. Can everybody see that, or can you see that, Joel?
Yeah, so let's see. We have 5% said 1, 2% said, 6% said 2. So that's only 11% at the very low end. And then at the very high end, you have 6 or 7, you have 9%. So there's a greater tendency for the extremes to load more toward the negative, right? 11 versus 9, but pretty balanced. But you do see 18% said 3. The majority, or the modal response, was just coping or getting by, 34%. 28% said 5, 7% said 6. So more people in this group it looks like it's balanced more toward the positive, Chuck, right? 28, 7, and 2.
Absolutely. And
And so,
some of the answers that I'm getting in here, my rural community is nervous but trying to pull together. My employees are healthcare workers. They gave it a 3. I made a rating of 1 because those with jobs are worried that they are going to lose them. My boyfriend is angry and anxious and scared all the time. This is definitely the kind of stuff that we're expecting to say. Lana, I work with a small number of people. We are self-isolating, working. I did a rating of 6 because I'm focusing on gratitude. Great job. We're blessed with home and jobs and food. That's why we gave it 5. I made a rating of 2 because I work with pre-diabetic patients and the patients are not dealing well. Definitely. At-risk people, kind of scary, that's for sure. Rating of 4 because jumped on me there. I'm seeing and hearing stressful conversations, worrying about job security, worrying about family. I work in a mental health facility. A 3, we are a healthcare organization and our employees are on the front line. Another one, 5, a lot of people I know are deciding to try to make the most of the time. So these are definitely some of the pieces. We're seeing job loss concerns. We're definitely seeing issues of folks that are on the front line. Folks that are at risk, the folks that do have some at-risk, health risks that definitely increase the percentages of the possibilities of if you get it, it becomes a bigger piece. So without a doubt, I think, Joel, we got a good range here and a good idea of what's going on out there.
but it's positive. All of that to say, it's positively skewed, right? So
Exactly.
that it's positively skewed. So this, I want to pause right here, that this one question is itself a discussion question that you can have, whether you're a practitioner or a friend or a family member. So you can ask people on a scale of 1 to 7, are you 1, reacting anxious, on a midpoint of 4, getting by, or at a 7, are you thriving? And this is one of the tools that we use in our training to get a discussion going. And so when you provided your comments, the question I asked for you, there are several questions that come now that we have this. One question, and you're still doing people, I rated a 7 because everyone I work with is showing a tremendous amount of strength. A question, there's a bias in the group due to our chosen profession. That's something I thought about, Jennifer. And that's why I'm asking you to ask other people, right? That's exactly why I'm asking you to ask other people, because your perception may be different than the other's perception. So one of the questions to ask is it any different now than it was a month ago? Is it really any different than it was a month ago?
You know what, Joel? Let me throw this out to you, because again, my wife, who is she's an optometrist by trade, and has shut down her office for the next few weeks. Just seeing emergency patients about once a week, but she's a perfect example of somebody that is probably better right now than she was a week or 2 ago, because she is doing those things that she truly loves, and she's saying, I'm doing one thing a day for the house, so one thing a day for my gardens, and one thing a day for work. So she's been able to actually, kind of take some time off. Now, I will say, if we ask this same question 2 weeks from now and we're in the same boat, which chances are we might be, that's really when it becomes, where does this number go? Does it go from a 5 to a 2 or a 3? And Lana, you're upside down. That's pretty impressive. There you go. And I know Lana, who's actually in the state of Washington, you've been locked down for quite a while, haven't you, Lana? You can actually unmute yourself here. I'm unmuting you for a second. If I can. Nope, I can't. So anyway, I know that she has been, and it's definitely a struggle, because that is something that we've got to make sure that we're handling.
So another question. So with this one measure, there are other things you could do. So I want to emphasize that we want to make this practical for you, so that you have a tool that you can use in your conversations, and make it okay for people to talk. the other question you can ask is, think about the number that you were at. And you can get refined. You can do 3.1, 3.2 if you want to. And the question would be, what would it take to go to the next highest level? So if you're at a 3, what would it take to go to the next highest level? So my question for you is all of you to think about that as another question. And to put that in, you could say, for me to go 1 point up, this is what I would need. Or this is what I think the community around me would need, right? And so I'm putting that out to the group, Chuck, because that's the resourcing question, right? What would it take? And I'm curious whether or not you can see that it's even mutable, that you can do it. So telehealth from Chuck.
Well, somebody else had said that, their doctors are doing more telehealth, and I'm seeing a huge uptick in telehealth and everything that's used from that perspective. Something else that was actually brought up earlier, and I wanted to bring it to the attention here to you, Joel, as well, is how does a lot of this work, the resilience to thriving, empowered health conscious, how does this relate into the things like mindfulness?
Well, okay, first and foremost, all of those terms are what we call broad, there's an academic term for it called superordinate constructs, right? Like the universe is a superordinate construct. What is that, right? What is resilience? What is love, right? What is intimacy? And so there are lots of debates about what mindfulness is, just as there are with health consciousness and resilience. And I just want to comment that the people are saying some things here that I'm going to try to tie into your question. To get 1 point up, we're seeing more objectivity from the media, right? More definitive answers from the medical community, control over my environment. So those are things, the reason, before we get to the question, Chuck, I just want to say that those are the places to think about where you do have control. If your answer to the question depends upon other people and things that you don't have influence over, be very, very careful. What I want you to do is think about how you can raise your point through things that are under your control. That's the empowered part, right? So go back and answer the question again. How can you bring up a point through things that you can do or that others can do? That's a big part of the empowered health consciousness part, right? So to answer Chuck's question, and this is a question for everybody, what is mindfulness? And there are 3 answers to these questions to make it more complicated. There's a trait, a state, and a process. And some people say with mindfulness that there are some people who are more mindful than others. For example, you can ask my wife, I am much less mindful than her. In fact, she would put me in the category of completely mindless. Okay?
My wife would too, Joe.
Yes. So that's a trait, right? Then there's a state, that there are things that happen like social distancing or physical distancing where you have to be mindful because I'm out in public. I better be careful. I better stay away. So you may not be, quote, mindful in your personality, but you're confronted with a situation where I better be mindful, right? Driving is a classic example where we have to pay attention, right? And then there's the process, which is what are the things that happen that keep us mindful, help us get back to mindfulness when we lose track, and how do we stay in that process, because it is a process. So the same thing goes with health consciousness and resilience, but even more so, because resilience by definition is a process. Resilience is about the process of learning from the stressor, right? So I prefer to use the word resilience because you always have the ability to learn from your stressor. And with resilience, you label what the stressor is. So those, to come back to the question about where you are in the 7 points, here's what I want to ask you. Think about the stressors that you're experiencing today. And I'd like you to think about whether or not the stressor falls into these different categories. And you can chat about this. The first category is a hassle. That it's just some hassle that came up that you had to deal with. Like my car battery died the other day and we spent 5 hours in the parking lot waiting for AAA, right? That was a hassle for my day. The next piece is a challenge. It's more than a hassle, but it's something that challenges you at a deeper level, maybe intellectually, emotionally, socially, and you're having to work on it. The next level up is adversity. That it's more than a challenge, but it's really something that is compromising your ability to function. That would be adversity. The next level up is trauma, right? Something that happens that not only compromises your function short term, but it's long term and you're ruminating about it and it really caused some damage. That's a trauma, right? So when you think about resilience as a process, part of what we're doing is learning to determine at what level is this stress? At what level am I working here? So when you go back and look at your where you were on those 7 levels, ask yourself, and remember the question was what you're perceiving out in the environment. Do you think that the people that you thought about, are they experiencing hassles? Are they experiencing challenges? Are they experiencing adversity? Are they experiencing trauma, right? And how does that impact their ability to cope? And number one. Number two, sometimes a challenge is just a hassle, right? So that's the cognitive behavioral aspect of resilience that we use. So Chuck, I know that was a lot, but I'm curious if people are how they frame what's going on right now. Is it just a matter of hassle? Is it a matter of challenge, adversity, or trauma?
You know, really, what's being conversed on out in the chat right now is really a lot of the coping skills that everybody's using. So it's we're definitely getting some challenges. Definitely, is what Allison's saying. Challenge from Patricia. Challenge from Melissa. Trauma from Michelle. So we're definitely seeing some of those words that are being used a lot. Depends on each person's individual situation for certain. Hassles and challenge, hassle. So we're seeing challenge kind of being the top word. But I do think it's interesting to see also some of the conversations that people are having as far as how they're coping with things, like turning off the news or reducing some of the things that are being talked about. Getting outside, that's definitely been a huge factor of what I'm saying. My favorite survey so far that I've seen this week was that the latest survey was that 99.9% of all dogs love the coronavirus. Simply because I know that mine personally is getting more walks than he probably has had in a long time. And, everybody's home and he gets to hang out with his entire clan. So these are definitely things that being talked about. Sanderson says my cat hates it. I think that's pretty good too. My parents are between challenges and adversity due to health condition and health literacy and tech literacy. Definitely believe that, Jennifer. That's a huge piece. I know my mom just turned 80 years old yesterday, so we can all wish her a happy birthday. But I am worried about them because they are high risk. They're both cancer survivors, so they definitely are being very cautious. Luckily, they live in rural Indiana, so it's going to be a few months before he gets out there. know,
Chuck, do
these
you
are,
think
oh, you
this is
meant
supposed
patients, not parents. Thanks,
supposed
Jennifer.
to be this is supposed to be fairly brief, so I'm curious if anyone has questions or comments. Right, we're not going to stay on too much longer. Is that right, or?
Yeah, we're going to stay on for a little while. We'll just kind of watch where everybody's going. I don't want to make these things super long because I think that takes away from the energy as well. Thanks, Daniel. I will let my mom know that you said happy birthday.
So are there any questions that people have that they would like for the group to consider? I do want to make a comment about the labeling. It's good to ask people how they perceive what's happening, because then you can gauge your response. Don't let your own perception of your number or your perception of whether it's a hassle, challenge, or adversity get in the way. As a wellness practitioner, try and enter into the space of the other person, right? So what we're doing here is giving you a language to think about, well, how are you experiencing this? And let people say, well, here, this is a hassle for me, but this is a challenge, right? So by giving that language, you're creating a cognitive framework. And we know from the research that a cognitive behavioral approach toward managing the stressor, right? Labeling, numbering, asking what can be done to improve, what's in your control. These are all fundamental skills, right? Is everyone clear what I'm saying here? Is clear?
Yeah, and Joel, really kind of where I'm seeing the main questions are really how are people connecting, especially folks who live alone or don't have technology, worry about families without access, how do they connect? Those are some of the questions that I'm really seeing right now. And how can their department, I work at a hospital in wellness. How can our department help those employees on the front line? So when we think about it from the perspective of, let's face it, social isolation was a huge problem prior to this. It's going to this will resonate even higher for a lot of people. Probably one of the scariest statistics that I've heard recently was 43% of people in the United States don't have somebody they feel they can call at 3 o'clock in the morning in case they don't have, in case of an emergency. And that's just, those are the kind of things that are, again, those triggers, as we talked about earlier, it's just going to make it even harder. So frontline employees in healthcare, that's definitely a question. Isolation, people resources. Those are definitely things that we're trying to do at NWI.
Let's take some of these questions, some really important questions here for the community. And part of what we're trying to do here is get everyone in the community to respond. So the first question, I work in a hospital in wellness. How can our department help those employees on the front line? I'm just going to read these. And there was maybe helping people find local outlets through virtual meetings, hangouts, et cetera. I'm in Central Florida, and I know a lot of entertainers are doing virtual parties. Another question from Jamie Peters is anyone providing their people resources, such as free training, hotlines for suicide or others, RDAP organizations, best news sources? Is there anything that can be done for those who are coronavirus patients in severe conditions in the hospital? So these are, and you're seeing some people responding here. So I'm going to hold back for a moment and see if you have suggestions about responding to any of these very important questions. And I don't think there's a simple answer. Chuck, that's my thought, is to see what people think.
Yeah, we'll kind of let it open up. I'm definitely seeing, Amber is, promoting the employee assistance programs. If you have an EAP, it's a huge opportunity to really bring those pieces to the table. We definitely have a lot of resources on things like the suicide prevention lines and some of those stress center pieces. Those are definitely going to be increasing a lot. Melissa Oden, is there a way to collect all of the questions, answers, solutions to put them in some sort of a clearinghouse? We're trying to put that together right now. So yes, we will be working on that. Lana, okay, here is my survival tip. Watch YouTube of Chris Mann and others who are making songs out of this. It will make you laugh and make you feel like you are not alone. Laughter is such a good medicine. It's part of the reason why I keep putting different things on my back phone. Yes, we're going to keep humor in there. That's for sure, because it's such an important piece. Can we get a copy of your PowerPoint? Yeah, we can. I'll put that out on the website. So yeah, that's really where things are going, Joel. I'm really seeing a lot of those things.
I uploaded again the
PDF
of the presentation today, and I'm going to give a shout out to some of the resilience facilitators that we've worked with. Janelle Baldwin, who has taken our course, she walks around the neighborhood with a bubble gun, a blowing bubble gun. She spent $5 from a Walmart, and she just goes around the neighborhood blowing bubbles. She puts stuffed animals in her front window, right? With, happy signs. So she's got a sloth, a llama, and a monkey, right? She leads.
Walk into a bar? I mean, come on, that you gave us that opportunity there, Joel. Come on.
So there's also some people who, they purchase, Nancy Chabot from Massachusetts, she purchases cards from her local museum to support the museum industry. And then she writes love letters to her family using those cards.
Nice.
Somebody else, Barbara from New Hampshire, she buys gift cards for local businesses. Not Starbucks, but maybe the local cafe. And she gives those gift cards out to people who are on the front lines, like nurses, people in the supermarkets. So she's both supporting the local industry, right? With $5, $10 gift cards, but she's giving those cards to the people who are experiencing the most stress, right? So random acts of kindness, and you can look at a lot of these recommendations in that file that I sent. So we're looking for that. I think that's what Chuck is saying. If you're doing something like that, or if you have some ingenuity that involves community, I think is really wonderful. And I'll say that I believe that wellness practitioners at the social level represent the fabric of the immune system of our society. That because of wellness practitioners' tendency toward optimism, because of a wellness practitioner's tendency toward efficacy, toward resilience, toward health consciousness and mindfulness, you could be role modeling a response now that raises that set point, that number, just by how you interact with people, just by how you treat people, and by doing these small little random acts, right? So instead of like lamenting the media, right, and reacting and commiserating, what can you do on a proactive basis to stand in that positive mindset? That's what and I didn't know that. I heard that from the practitioners, right? So I'm wanting to support you. I think each one of you has your own ingenuity. And I want you to tap into your own ingenuity, your own skills and your own talents. And that's resilience. That's the bringing out the best in yourself and bringing out the best in others. So I'm curious if people have ideas like that. What are you doing? What are some ingenious ideas? What are some ways that you can, we're seeing free yoga and Pilates, right? Silly, simple stuff. So these are the kinds of things that I think people will remember.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, one of my favorite things that I've been doing is actually getting on some sort of a Facebook Live or some program where it's a band, and I usually try to find some of the independents, the indie bands. One of my favorite bands, and it's a group that I've known for years, called the Cowboy Poets. They're out of Nashville, Tennessee, and they did a fireside musical. It was Nick and Scott, and they did a fireside. So they had it set up and they had a little fire going in their backyard and they started singing some of the songs. And what I love also about that in particular was I was able to actually go out to PayPal and give them a tip for, thanking them for doing something like that. So, it goes back to a lot of the things that we're hearing over here. It's this idea of making sure that we're taking care of our local restaurants, our local coffee shops, the local businesses that are going to truly, either if they survive, and we anticipate they will, we hope they will come back with a vengeance, and they're the ones that are going to bring the dollars back into those communities. When you talk about local businesses, the standard number is 75 cents of every dollar stays in the local community, whereas the larger groups, it's closer to 35 or 40 cents for every dollar. So those are the kind of things that we've got to make sure that we're thinking about and doing and taking care of. I love one of my favorite quotes that I saw recently was, remember all those times that you went to the local shops to ask for a donation for a extracurricular activity like band or sporting events? Well, it's your time to give back to them. And I love that story, Joel.
Yeah, we're seeing some great things here.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I am creating a Zoom Microsoft Teams meeting to colleagues to join me in a family scavenger hunt. In my neighborhood, we had a garage cleaning day and everyone was in their driveways with the music playing.
Yep. Local DJs are doing a Facebook Live of new playlists. I love that. Having a little virtual rave. Thanks, Sundus. I organized a virtual concert with my husbands. You got three, huh? The Three Amigo Band asked people to buy local dinner for dinner concerts. We love this.
Who has more than one husband? Who was that?
I think it was a mistake way it was written.
No, maybe it wasn't. Maybe there's somebody here that's really great.
Yeah, we had people from Spain and the UK actually join. That's awesome. I've seen people playing bingo with a megaphone. Okay, that one's a great one. I'm all in on that one.
Now, of course,
you get Steve Harvey to do it. B-17.
What's really interesting is the narrative around this is that when you start getting into the uplifts, right? So for the opposite of the hassle is an uplift, right? If you go, and you can go up the scale with the other ones too. Those people who might be experiencing trauma or might be at the serious level of challenge, the positive statements that we're making here could land in the wrong way, right? So that's that compassion and sensitivity, right? So I hope that makes sense as well, that's why I keep coming back to really listening for where people are in their stress, engaging your response. Someone mentioned motivational interviewing earlier. Making sure that your response is appropriate to that. If it is, of course, trauma, then, referral to the EAP, going to the SAMHSA website. Chuck there's a Corona page on the National Wellness Institute website. Can you bring that up? I think that's a really important page to show people.
It's actually called Wellness Outlook. But yeah, let me pop out of here real quick. You guys will probably get to see some things on my web. By the way, the multiple husbands in the distress. I think Judy Jepson wins the chat tonight.
I would think you would have less stress.
Oh God, if there was more of me, my wife would kill me.
But which one? Which one would?
I think we'd all be the insane one. Yeah, I'm pulling it up. Give me a second here. Problem is I have a lot of stuff open, so that's.
I think the key question for a lot of people in this webinar is, what is it that inspires you? Right? What is it that in the midst of the challenge, if you will, is going to inspire you moving forward? What inspiration can you take away? And how can you offer that? Whether it's even only to your family, right? And I don't want to say only, right? But perhaps now that's really the most important thing. So,
Oh, Melissa, I love the NPR Tiny Desk concerts. I forgot about those. Thanks for reminding me.
so this is a page that NWI has that has a lot of uh, resources. And if you see this and it's missing something, let Chuck know. Maybe there's something else that could be added to this, right?
Most definitely. And we're happy to do so. We have a number of things on here that are also from our friends and our partners from other organizations, making sure that we're not just, we don't want to just create more stuff. Let's just go find the great stuff that's already out there and add it on here. So without a doubt, this is, we're definitely keeping this updated in our NWI journal.
So Chuck, it's too bad we can't unmute people. You may have muted everybody, because
Yeah.
I would love to hear from Alice in New York. Who else, if you raise your hand, who else is in New York right now? I think we should give a special attention to that, because New York is really struggling. And I appreciate, Alice, you're telling us about that. Anyone else from New York?
There's probably quite a few, and I agree. Patricia Garcia is from New York, or is in New York at least.
Yeah,
So.
please share with us what it is that you feel is working. What is it that you need? How can this community help you, right? Is there something that we can provide you that you can share with others?
All my family is up there, Tyra.
I grew up in Far Rockaway, for you fellow New Yorkers, so.
Well, Joel, let's, again, I want to kind of come down to the end here. One of the questions that I want to just throw out to you goes back to just a simple question, and that is, how do you see wellness being viewed post-health crisis?
How do I see it?
Yeah, how do you see it being viewed post-health crisis?
Well, I really, it goes back to the very beginning. I hope people will, by how they respond, that it's more about wholeness than about wellness. That people start to realize that it's not just about diet and exercise, although that's very important right now, and sleep. And I know Cynthia Canigliaro is here, and she has advice on sleep. Those are all very important. But we've now tapped into two important things: our common humanity, right? This is a pandemic. And maybe it's opening people's eyes to the wholeness of humanity, and that we are one whole tribe. That's the first thing. And that in appealing to wholeness, that we bring all the other dimensions along. The other thing has to do with death and being closer to death. And I don't use the term physical distance. I don't use the term social distance. I use the term soulful distance. And by soulful distance, I mean, how close are you to your understanding of mortality? And my hope is that wellness practitioners start to realize that and there are people who work in hospice, there are wellness people who work in hospice. There are wellness people who work with the death and dying. But I think that when we're close to or closer to the idea of death, that it changes our perceptions of what's important, right? Preciousness, right? The importance of connection, the importance of support. And I think that we have an opportunity to help people realize that we're not just about diet and exercise, that we're about social connection. We're about helping people be with their vulnerability as a human being. We're all going to die, right? And I don't mean to be negative about that, because in our culture, there's all this stigma around death. But it's really embracing this idea that we're all here in this together, and we need to get through it together, and we can support each other through it. So that's my thought.
That's fantastic, Joel, and I appreciate that because it's the one thing that I'll say, and again, you hear it in the professional sports world a lot. Father Time is undefeated, and that is definitely something that we do have to kind of keep in mind because I think it is one of the things where I do feel like some of the unknown is probably the biggest piece of what's really going to be moving us forward. And again, I will throw a shout out to Melissa. I will promise you within the next week or so, our next conversation will be around this question because it could be an entire wellness or webinar in and of itself. So I appreciate that. Joel Bennett, thank you so much tonight for your time. I cannot say enough things. Glad for your friendship of probably 20 plus years now. And look forward to many more.
Everybody, I met him last week. Okay.
Yeah, whatever. We met at a SHRM conference 20 years ago in Washington, D.C. So, but everybody, thank you so much for coming on. I look forward to more conversations like this. And if you guys have any new ideas on how we can title this, until then, it'll be Chit Chat with Chuck. And that is a horrible name. So I'm looking for better names. With that, enjoy the evening, stay positive, be the force, be the champion, and really make everybody better. And we look forward to more of these conversations.